Did you know that a staggering 25% of engineering firms struggle to retain their top talent? It's no secret that the talent war is real, and we're here to arm you with strategies you need to build a top-notch team. In this episode, I'm talking with Tyler Wiggins, Operations Manager, Engineering Recruiter, and owner of Agavos Group, LLC. We're talking about the challenges structural engineering firms face in hiring engineers, the main factors contributing to the engineering labor shortage, and the effective strategies for companies to improve retention and reduce attrition among their engineering teams. Today, I'm your host, Rachel Holland, and this is the Structural Engineering Channel. Hey, Tyler, thanks so much for joining us today. Can you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and the journey from engineering manager to engineering recruiter?
Yeah, absolutely. So my first great job out of college was an engineering position at a solar mounting company called K2 Systems. So I started there as a product development engineer where I wore two hats at the beginning. One was helping customers with their tricky commercial PV projects. I designed the layouts based on their production needs, supplied them with bills of materials, and kind of helped them troubleshoot any permitting challenges that came up, which typically were on the structural side of things. And then the second thing I did was design, prototype, and test new mounting systems and products that we planned on selling. So after 2 years of doing that, I was promoted to engineering manager, where I initially managed a team of 2 engineers. And then over the next 3 years, I grew that department to an international team of 12 engineers, as well as managing interns and coordinators as well. And we did a lot more of the product design side. So this was designing, prototyping, testing, manufacturing, and launching a variety of solar mounting products and systems. So mostly for the residential space, but we had projects in the commercial space as well. So I worked with a few structural engineering firms during my time there. There was a lot of necessary engineering evaluations that had to be done depending on where these systems were being installed in the US. And my responsibilities also included technical sales for our very large accounts. So often travel to potential customers' offices to present the technical capabilities of the products and systems, as well as answer any questions that they had. So while I really enjoyed this work, I had an entrepreneurial itch that needed to be scratched. And in 2020, I saw the writing on the wall regarding the difficulties that companies were having when it came to hiring engineers. And I reached out to some of my industry friends to confirm this, and they said that was absolutely the case. So I asked if they thought that their management team would be open to me helping them try and solve this problem for them in the form of moonlight work. And much to my delight, they agreed to it. You know, I obviously at the agreement of a low fee, since I'd kind of be learning as I went. But I had a ton of fun doing that side work with them. And over the following 6 months, I helped them grow their engineering teams and in some cases their production teams, helping them with some of their more hard to fill positions. And over that 6 months, I also found some more clients to work with, helping them solve the same problem. And I was able to take that business full time in 2021. And that brings us to today. Currently operating a single member LLC as a doer seller. So I specifically help structural and forensic engineering firms find candidates for hard to fill positions. Spend most of my time doing business development to find new clients to work with and recruit structural engineers for those clients through marketing and outreach efforts. Most of my clients choose to work with me because of my engineering background. They may have worked with other recruiters in the past and had challenges with them because they don't fully understand the types of engineers they're going for. I'm sure you can appreciate in structural engineering, there's a variety. You know, we're talking about people who are predominantly doing engineering on bridges versus buildings, or maybe they're just working on solar. So there's obviously overlap, but if they're looking for someone with a particular set of skills, then they want to be particular about who they're spending their time talking to, which is absolutely fair.
So how did you okay, so I know we were talking, you went to Cal Poly SLO, so shout out to our alma mater, but
absolutely.
As a materials engineer, how did you get looped in with like structural engineering recruiting specifically, and not just like a more broad-based engineering recruiting?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. So when I was at K2 Systems, and this goes for all, solar mounting manufacturing companies, they typically aren't doing their structural engineering in-house. They may be, but I can't speak for every single company that's out there. But a lot of them work with these, third-party structural engineering firms that have the capability of doing this work with solar. So I was fortunate enough to spend a lot of time working with them. I mean, hours and hours and hours of conversations about how do we make this product work for this particular area. And through those conversations, there was a lot of learning that went on my side about, we'd end up, just becoming friends and sharing challenges with each other. And when I first got started with recruiting, it actually wasn't on the structural side. It was more on the manufacturing engineering side.
Okay.
But I maintained a lot of relationships with my previous coworkers, and they still have these relationships with these engineering firms, and they were like, hey, these firms that we're partnering with are having some very serious problems hiring structural engineers. Do you think you can help them? And I was like, absolutely, something
Okay.
I can help them with. I'd love the opportunity. And that's really, it was a referral. How I got it to answer your question, it was a referral, but once I was referred in and realized what the need was, I was like, wow, this is significant. The significant need for structural engineers right now. This is somewhere where I feel like I can really help them with my skill set.
Right.
So, from the material side, it was, my work with K2, got me to where I'm at today.
So, okay, so you obviously then got looped into the structural engineering part of recruiting. And then why is it that you think that structural engineers are having such a hard time hiring right now?
Yeah. It's a really good question. So I'm going to try and answer it as concisely as I can. So companies are struggling really because there are more open structural engineering roles than there are available candidates to fill them that like actually physically exist with the skills that they're looking for. That's why, when these companies post jobs on LinkedIn, they produce few to no candidates a lot of the time, which is crazy. It's not uncommon, in certain areas, it might be a little bit better. Like SoCal might be a little bit easier, but, some clients I've worked with will have a job listing open for 3 months and not have a single candidate that comes through, which is wild. You compare that to 10, 15 years ago, you'd at least have someone, but not seeing anyone. And I know we're going to get into this in much more detail, but to be concise with the answer is that these engineers just physically don't exist to fill these roles. There's not enough of them in the market.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
What do you like? So, okay, so it's basically, it's a labor shortage, right? So like,
yes,
what do you think is contributing to that? What are the main factors?
Yes. So, I'm going to talk about 4 of them, so this might be a little long-winded. I'll make sure that I recap it at the end, but this is a fantastic question that's very near and dear to my heart. I've been studying pretty heavily for about a year now. It's also kind of hard to explain, so I'll do the absolute best I can here. But the first problem of the 4 that I'm going to talk about is a macroeconomic problem, and it's population rate decline. This may have been something you've heard about at one point or another. And it's not in the news as much as I wish it was, but I guess it's not as exciting as a problem as the other ones that are out there right now. But there's someone named Jennifer Sciuba. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. She has an incredible TED Talk on YouTube. It's about 10 to 15 minutes long. She goes into, significant detail on this topic. I highly recommend anyone listening to it to check it out. That's Jennifer Skiuba on TED Talk. Awesome. And if you're not familiar with the term population rate decline, like the basic problem is that there are more people retiring in the United States, right? There are more people retiring than there are to backfill the positions that they're leaving. So it's kind of like this complicated math problem. Basically, just to describe it, right? So it's like an upside down T. You got men on one side, women on the other, and it's listed by population, sort of interval, right? So we've got like 0 to 10, then 11 to 20, then 21 to 30, and so on and so on. So, I'm not an economist, so I'm going to use this term very loosely, right? But in we'll say like an economically healthy, like population pyramid, there would be more people in those, 0 to 10, 11 to 20, 21 to 30 age group than there would be at the top of the pyramid. So it'll look, like a pyramid, right? And so the idea is that the people in the working age group are able to help the people at the top who are leaving work, and they're being helped by the social systems that we have in place to make sure that they're able to live a comfortable life, which is great. If we look at an extreme example of this problem, if you take a look at like South Korea's or Japan's population pyramid, you could really get an idea of the challenge we're seeing here. But the top of that pyramid is wider than the base is. So they're, as they retire, the majority of them were working. So you've got this like economic need that they want to keep these businesses open, and there just aren't physically people to backfill the positions. So the U.S. is seeing the same problem. If you look at the population pyramid, you'll see it, where you have this group at the top who's like halfway through retirement, still retiring now. And then right below, there's a dip. There's a dip right there where as they retire, there's less to backfill. And then there are other engineers who are younger who are getting these awesome growth opportunities, but they're kind of getting in there younger than maybe they were traditionally. And then everyone's kind of backfilling. And then you eventually get to a point where there's no one physically left to backfill. So at the absolute baseline, that is like the baseline problem here. It's this kind of macroeconomic problem.
Okay.
Which is wild, right? So that's problem number one. Problem number two was caused 15 years ago during the recession. Unfortunately, a lot of structural engineers lost their jobs during that time. They were unable to find a replacement job, and they decided to leave. Probably made the very hard decision to leave the industry altogether. And, we've probably all met engineers who made that decision at that time. It was really tough. I know I have, and it was a hard thing, right? A lot of them went to aerospace, or maybe they went to tech, or they got into sales or something where they were able to transfer those skills. And, we obviously hope they're, doing well and had a fulfilling career from that. But that's kind of adds to this problem, right? Where those engineers were the ones who are going to backfill the people who are retiring right now, so you're just adding to like that shortage in that group. The third problem is the pipeline of civil structural engineers graduating college was not large enough to handle the challenges from the recession, as well as the challenges we're seeing from population rate decline. So this is one of those things where it's like it needed to be solved decades ago. And it's not one of those things where you're just like, okay, well, what if we did something crazy and paid students to study engineering to like help make up for this deficit? Well, even if you did something wild like that, it would be 8 years until they have the PE license to perform the work that is currently required right now. So even if you were to do something like this, it's really only solving the problem 8 to 10 years from now. Just tough. And then the fourth problem I'll talk about, there's probably more than four, but these are the big ones that I'm seeing, is structural engineers leaving the industry due to low pay and overwork. And it's, obviously not every engineers are paid very well, but there are some that aren't. And I talked about this topic in a lot of detail. If anyone here is following me on LinkedIn, they saw I made, 4 posts about it last week, but I did some research on this, and it appears that engineers are earning less now than they were in the 80s when you account for the buying power of today's dollars. So in a world of easy to find comparisons online, and in a world where engineers are talking about their pay a lot more than they used to, I unfortunately receive a lot of feedback, frustrated structural engineers who haven't broken into that 6-figure earning potential, even though they have a PE, which is very frustrating for them. And again, what I'm going to say next is very common things that I hear from engineers who reach out to me every week, but they see their software engineering friends bringing in 150K plus salaries with unlimited PTO. They see their sales engineering friends bringing in 250K salaries, which for hard work, I'm not saying it's easy work. It's not, it's very hard, but, they see that and they're just like, the work that I'm doing as a structural engineer is critically important for infrastructure, like critically important. It's a huge safety thing. It's extremely valuable work. And they don't feel that the world or that the companies are valuing the work in the way that they see it when they compare themselves to what, other people are doing. They're still hard work. I'm not saying software engineering is easy. It's absolutely not easy. It's hard, but, they're not seeing that when they do that comparison, which is tough. And comparison is a thief of joy. We all know that, but it's still challenging to see. And to be fair to companies here, pay is absolutely improved. I've seen it improve over the last couple of years, been doing this work. Salary ranges are going up, which is great. But from the majority of the conversations I have with structural engineers, what they're really looking for is comfortable pay. And I define comfortable pay as twice that of a living wage. So a living wage is like the absolute basics that you need to live by yourself for, survival. So we're talking about like just housing and food, right? Comfortable pay will be twice that. You're taking care of all your housing needs, your food needs. You're also able to save for retirement. You're also able to enjoy life the way that you want to enjoy it. And anyone listening is like, well, what's comfortable pay? What's comfortable pay? Well, if we look at like a simple calculation of it, again, this is like, I'm taking some assumptions here. It's about $120,000 for a single person with no dependents, right? And that'd be for like a more wealthy state like California, Massachusetts, Hawaii. $120,000, you can build a comfortable life with that. And it's essentially what it is. So to recap, the 4 things, why is this happening? Baseline problem, population rate decline. Second problem is recession, which is making that problem worse. Third problem is the pipeline wasn't big enough to handle these challenges that were coming through. And the fourth problem is, there are people leaving the industry if, they weren't able to make the pay that they wanted to, and they're able to take those, these are smart individuals that have a lot of skills, able to take them to a company that pays them what they're looking for, and they're making that decision to leave.
Yeah, those are all really like, I feel like I've definitely heard about all of those throughout it. And I feel like one of the things that SEOC, I'm based in California. You're based in California too, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. A SEOC is the Structural Engineers Association of California. And one of the big things that they've done a lot of research and surveys and analysis on like why people leave the industry. And it's interesting too, because I think another thing that comes into play is like it tends to be a very traditional sort of profession. And so like it's not as like flexible as other like new high tech kind
Yes.
of roles have been. And so I think that that's another thing that like takes people away. But it is interesting because I know like it's one of those things, like as a young person, when you're 18, right? You're like, do I want to sign up for one of the hardest majors in college? Like I remember so many all-nighters in the lab. And, my business friends didn't even have class on Fridays, So it was like, you're signing up for that. You work so hard. I mean, even when you're in the industry, you work so hard. And then like, in terms of like a structure, I mean, like you said, it's like critically important work, right? Like without us, like it just, there's so many issues without the structural engineer involved. And somehow it's like, and this is another thing that SEOC has kind of like brought to the surface, but there's a way that, I don't know what the way is, but there's a way that our whole profession needs to work together to promote ourselves. And we're not typically overly, I don't know what the word is, overly like, we're not constantly saying like, look at how awesome we are. We tend to be like a more humble bunch that like don't talk about how important everything is. And so I think then what happens is it exposed to like society, and then like it's just there's the values not placed on it. So there's like so many things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, it's a multifaceted challenge, right? There's multiple things going on here, and the solution for sure is there's a lot of things that are going to take to find that solution too.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And not to mention too, like the amount of building that's happening in comparison to like, you know, you earlier were comparing it to like the 80s, you know, like there's just a lot more building happening. So yeah,
absolutely.
Definitely a lot of compounding issues. So
yeah, for sure. For sure.
So, okay. So another question for you then, when you are working with engineers and trying to place them at a firm that would be a good fit for them, what are some of the common questions that they have?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So you're going to see this as kind of a recurring theme here, but the most common question I get, hands down, no comparison, is about pay and benefits, 1,000%. So it's important to remember for everyone listening, there's any engineering managers listening here, most structural engineers are receiving anywhere from 1 to 7 recruiter messages in their inbox every week, which is wild. Asking them to move out of state, asking them to go to their competitor that's, you know, across the street or in the same city every single week. They're receiving about 1 to 7 recruiter messages. So if they're serious about investigating an opportunity, which they will have many to look at, the pay has to be there, which is totally fair because there's an inherent risk with making the decision with the known that you have for the unknown that's over there, right? And you're going to know as an individual what number you need to see to handle that risk tolerance, right? Just like when someone's considering an investment, there's a risk tolerance with that. What do I stand to gain from the money that I'm putting in? There's risk tolerance with what do I stand to gain by making this big decision? Changing a company. This is absolutely a huge decision. And if the pay isn't there or could be there, it's essentially a non-starter. Unless they're extremely unhappy, being worked to the bone is usually what it is, just being overworked. They don't even want to have a conversation unless the pay is more than what they're currently making, which is absolutely fair. I understand that 100%. So after that, let's say that the pay is there, and now we're kind of having a conversation about this role. The most important questions are typically about the work itself. You know, what are they doing? Does it align with what they're excited about, what they love to do, the industry that they want to be in long term? Maybe it's a new industry that they really want to get into. Those types of questions, the types of projects, things like that. The company culture is big. And when we're talking about company culture, I think it's important to kind of like distinguish what we're talking about here. A lot of it is like how the work is done and the excitement that the team has about the work. Is this a company that, is overworking their employees? Is there a way to know that? Is it possible for them to have a conversation with someone who works there? Is there flexible work? If they get sick, but they don't need to take a sick day, but they want to work from home. Is that a possibility? Is there hybrid work? Is there flexible work? Like these are, all of this surrounds the company culture where it's like, how does the management team manage the work effort here? What is it going to be like me working for this person? Is mentorship part of it? All of those things, in my opinion, are around that work culture, that company culture. So those are very important. And then growth opportunities, for sure. Spend a lot of time talking about that. Things like some engineers have aspirations to become a partner one day. So the question that I might have for the hiring managers, what does the path to partnership look like here? For someone coming in, is that a possibility in this role? Some engineers really want to get into project management and having that conversation as well. What does that path to project management look like? What is that path? Some of them are really interested in working with customers. They want to spend a lot of time working with customers. What does that path look like? If this is a forensic firm, it's going to be a lot of consulting work. maybe they're doing some now, they want to do a lot more. What does that look like? So having those questions about growth, super important.
So, okay, a couple of questions on that. You were talking about flexible spending and then like the kind of the risk tolerance, right? Or flexible spending, sorry. Flexible schedule. Sorry, that came out wrong.
Yes, absolutely.
Are you finding that more people these days want the option for a flexible schedule? Are they wanting to work from home? Are they asking for part-time? Like, have you had people asking for part-time? Like, what is kind of like the trends that you're seeing right now with that? I'm just curious.
Absolutely. Yeah, those are fantastic questions. So it's probably something I should be documenting a lot better, but I'll give you kind of like my anecdotal, just think about the conversations. I've had a lot of conversations over the last 6 months. So it's very, very rare for an engineer to reach out to me and say, I only want to work in office 100% of the time. That's extremely rare. I can actually think of one time in the last 2 years that someone said that. The vast majority are looking for hybrid work. Ideally, it is 3 days in office, 2 days at home, 4 days in office, 1 day at home. They're happy with. If you can find something that's 1 or 2 days in office, with 3 or 4 at home, that's great too. But from my conversation, it sounds like a lot of, we'll say engineers that are a little more inexperienced in their career, we'll say like kind of like 0 to 4 year experience range, are cool with being in the office because a lot of them are
learning,
looking at the long-term picture, which is I know I need to be working under an SE because I want to get my SE one day, which in my opinion is a fantastic way to go about growth, like being where the SEs are and doing work with them. Like you'll learn so much. So, which is good. But to specifically answer your question, once we get like into the PE range where they have a PE and they're becoming more established in their career, absolutely searching for hybrid work and flexible work. And it's going to distinguish between those two things because they're not quite the same for anyone listening, who wants to know. Hybrid work means they have the ability to work indistinguishable of the geographic location, but typically it is they have some days at home, some days in office. That's hybrid. Flexible work is usually they have a set time during the day that they have to be at work. I've seen companies where it's like 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. where they have to be available or have to be in the office if it's their in-office day, but they could show up at 9:55 and then they can stay till whatever, 7 p.m. Can't do the math, and whatever long that 8-hour workday is. They have flexibility on when they want to start. So that's flexible work. And that is absolutely something that engineers are looking for. They want to have that ability because life comes up. I mean, a lot of these engineers have families. I've got a daughter myself. When she's sick, it's tough,
Totally.
Having the ability to be flexible with work is critically important.
What about part-time? Are people asking for part-time?
Oh, yes. I was going to say, I couldn't remember the other thing you asked. That is an interesting one. I've been getting asked about that a lot this year.
I feel like it's been coming up a lot lately.
Yeah, I've had 5 engineers in the last 4 months, I think, if I'm doing the math right, look for part-time job, 20 hours a week, 1099, part-time. And I've had firms ask about that as well, looking for that sort of match. So I do see that need. It's interesting. Are you seeing that as well, or have you been hearing about that?
I mean, I know a few people that have that set up. Not where I work, but other places. Yeah. And it's definitely been coming up, and it's just been coming up. So
yeah, and it makes sense. I mean, what I'm seeing is it's like the 20-year experience engineer who's seen a lot of projects, and then there's the company who's like, maybe they have a couple engineers on staff, and like we're getting a lot more work, but we don't know if we can hire someone full time. I want to fill someone with 20 hours a week and bring this person in who is like, for lack of a better description, is kind of like plug and play. They can take the project and they can run with it, and they could ask for a higher rate, right? I'm making up a number here, but like, $100 an hour, you could probably sustain a decent life if, at $100 an hour at 20 hours a week, if your expenses are pretty low, which they may be if you've built up 20 years of experience before. So yeah, I am seeing that in that kind of range for sure.
Interesting. And then, okay, one other follow-up question. For when you're taking that jump, how you were saying like there's the risk involved, right? Going
Yes.
from the known to the
Yes.
unknown. You don't know. You just don't know. Is it going to be good? Is it going to work for me? All the different things. Am I going to be happy there? Is there like a range that you say with the pay? Like it should be a certain jump, or is there like a guideline on that? Or how do you deal with that when you're dealing with, you're saying their first question is pay?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So it depends. I would say it depends on how the candidate and I, or potential candidate and I, came to have our conversation. So I have structural engineers reach out to me every week, which is great. I love these conversations. Anyone listening, please keep doing it. But they're like, hey, I'm interested in making a move between now and X. Sometimes it's like, I want to move in summer of 2025. I'm like, okay, well, we can talk about that now, but I don't have any opportunities to share with you, and then, I'll have the conversation and they're like, well, okay, well, what are you looking to make? What are you looking to make? I was like, this obviously isn't a negotiation. I'm here to help you. What range of salary are you looking to make with this move? And sometimes they have a number in mind. Sometimes they're like, I don't know. What should I ask for? Here's what I'm making now. Here's my experience. Can you help me come up with this number? More than happy to help them do that as well. But that's one way. And then the second way is that, if I'm reaching out to someone about a role that I'm recruiting for, then they're going to see the range for that role in my messaging. So they'll already know what that range is. And that range was apparently interesting enough for us to have the conversation. And sometimes I'll have them reach out. I've had this happen before where they're like, that range is lower than what I'm interested in. What I'm really interested in is X, but what you probably didn't see on my LinkedIn profiles that I also know why that company might be interested in that. Do you think that there could be like a level up role above this one where they could bring me in? And I have successfully hired people to do, even the next level up than the one I was recruiting for, because the company's like, this is actually fantastic. We tried to hire for that role and couldn't do it, so we were going to try and just get someone lower, but now you found them. Let's go.
Okay.
Which is awesome. So I love those conversations.
Interesting. Yeah. What are the typical challenges that engineers are facing in terms of career advancement?
Yeah, so the most common challenge I hear about is lack of timeline. So their manager may say that there's a growth opportunity down the road, but they don't really have an idea of what that timeline is. And I understand both sides here. When I was an engineering manager, it was difficult to say with any certainty that there's going to be a growth opportunity. There are fluctuations in the market, and growth opportunities are typically driven by increased revenue. Like the revenue has to be there in order to sustain now this higher pay and whatever the role entails. If it entails managing engineers that you plan on hiring, the revenue has to be there for it to make sense to bring that person up into that role. So there's, talking about fluctuations in the market, talked about the challenges with that. So, all of that said, the engineering manager can absolutely communicate that kind of plan with the engineer. So it could be like, okay, well, I know you want to move into, just say senior structural engineer. Senior structural engineers have to have experience with A, B, C, and D. I'm just making this up, right? They have to have their SE, and they had to have taken, 5 projects of a certain size from A to Z. And that's like the minimum, like technical requirements moving in this role. But then they can also say, additionally, the company has to be able to hit this revenue goal, or else it's just not possible. So at least if that understanding is there, now it's something that the engineer can manage. But, I also understand that that's a challenging conversation to have on both sides, but I feel like there's a way to find some middle ground there. And, that's why that those challenges is why many engineers pursue or choose to pursue growth opportunities at other firms.
Mm-hmm.
And, sometimes it can just be easier, especially with the labor shortage we're seeing now. Firms that used to only promote from within, maybe they had a policy where it's like, look, we only promote from within. Well, if the engineers that they were planning on promoting left, for whatever reason, now they're unable to promote from within. So now they have to look for leadership roles outside of their firm. And I speak with a lot of firms that have to go that direction. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah. Yeah.
When,
what about, in terms of companies, you deal with them a lot with hiring, but I'm curious, like, because you get people contacting you that want to make a change, right?
Yes.
So do you have like ideas in your head about like what could companies be doing better to minimize like them wanting to leave? I mean, obviously there's always sometimes like a cultural, like the culture of the company, like maybe it's not a match. Like that's, I mean, and I feel like I talk to a lot of kids like early out of college. I shouldn't say kids, young professionals, early out of college, they're still trying to find like their home, if you will, right? Like they have a good job. Totally. It's totally fine. There's nothing to complain about, but they don't necessarily feel like it fits them perfectly. Right. You know?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that's like a very, I think that's a very natural reason. That's like no harm to either party or whatever, you know, it's just like not a fit. But what about like, when it's not that, like, are there things companies could be doing to retain good people better?
Yeah. No, it's a great question. And I want to say this, it's like that answering that question is not something that I have direct experience with, where a company's like, hey, you know, I want to pay you to help us solve this problem. So I'm going to answer it in what my opinion would be based on the conversations that I'm having with engineers who reach out to me every week who are in pain. Like that's the reason, the majority of the time, the reason they reach out to me is they're in pain. Something about their work is causing pain in their life and they're trying to get away from that pain. So a big part of their pain, the majority of the time, is their pay. So this is a recurring theme here. They want to earn more. And the question that comes up, and it's one that I attempted to answer last week because this is actually a hard question, in my opinion, a very hard question to answer, is at what point should an engineer expect to earn comfortable pay? And if we define comfortable pay as twice that of a living wage, at what point should they come to it to expect to earn that? And it's a hard question to answer because, you know, as someone who operates a business, you know, I don't have employees, but I know ones that do, like overhead costs is a very big factor that they absolutely have to consider. And they have to consider that when they're pricing out jobs and how much profit they're going to make on it. And they have all these considerations. So at what point do we say, okay, you know, this person's earned their PE, they're able to do this, they're able to do this, they should be earning a comfortable wage? Or does the company take the stance and it's like, no, you earn a comfortable wage from day one, you know, that's quite the stance too. So where does that number lie? And in my opinion, I think a big part of retention is coupled around answering that question. Because if someone's considering leaving, right, let's say that they actually, you know, they're treated very well at this company, but they're like, it could be a fit. I could see myself here long term. I'm not really sure, you know, but then a recruiter comes in their inbox and has an offer for 20% more than they're currently making. 20% more is life-changing money. Like if you're making 100,000 and now you're making 120,000, that is, you know, you're going to notice that in your life. You can now afford that car that you want. You can now like really save for that house you want to buy. Like that is like, you know, there's no hard feelings. This company's awesome, but I'm making 20% more. I have to go.
Yeah.
You know, and that's tough. So retention wise, it's, you know, that's something that companies have to compete against because, you know, I forgot to mention this earlier, but this is absolutely an important part of this conversation is that, you know, when a structural engineer, the way the market is right now, geographically too, there's a little bit of dependence here, but, you know, when a structural engineer makes a decision, hey, I want to leave my current company, I'm going to respond to recruiters, I'm going to apply. It would not be uncommon for them to send 5 applications, get invited for 5 interviews, and then receive 5 offers. That is insane. In any other industry, that's an unheard of conversion rate, an absolutely unheard of conversion rate. And it's not uncommon. Like last week, I was talking with a candidate that I was working with for a role. They ended up accepting another offer, which is great. You know, I want them to find growth. But, you know, they're interviewing with like 5 companies and received a couple offers really quickly. And then was like, great, now I have got options on where I want to go. So companies have to remember that when they're thinking about retention is, okay, they just have to assume every engineer on my staff right now has a recruiter in their inbox right now. So, what are the important things that I can do as a manager to ensure that they're happy? And the two biggest pain points I hear about, hands down, is pay and overwork. So engineers typically don't want to work more than 45 hours per week. They typically don't want to be put in positions where they're extremely stressed about a project that they don't have the experience to handle. It's a very stressful situation, especially given the work. And if they feel that they're underpaid with that stress, it's like this doubly coupled pain, that they're in.
Interesting.
So I would say, to answer your question, retention-wise, if possible, make sure the pay is better than what the competition is. Do everything you can to ensure that engineers aren't being underworked. Do everything you can to ensure that the engineers have their needs met when it comes to working on challenging projects, which inevitably come up.
Right. It's so interesting too, because from like the other side of it, right? Like as like, say a company like looking to hire someone, like, it's always so scary too, because you want to offer them a lot of money because you want to make it enticing for them to like take that risk, right? But at the same time, you're like, I don't know what their performance is going to be. And like,
absolutely,
it's so scary. So
I understand. Yeah, I understand completely where you're at. And like that's a challenge, that companies, that I have conversations with companies where they're like, this is a higher salary than we typically pay. What's the expectation on the work? And that's a hard question to answer. And I feel like it's one where it's really important to have very, very prepared interviews, and interview questions set up.
Yeah.
Where, one thing I try and do with my clients, this is what I do, is like before I submit a candidate to a client, I have a 45-minute conversation with them where I'm going in as much detail as I possibly can into projects that they've worked on that are related to the work that the company wants to do. And I file all of this into like a 2 or 3 page report, based on the notes from that conversation, combined with their resume and ideally combined with the portfolio of work. And I submit all of that to, the client that I'm working with. And the hopes is that now when they have the conversation with the candidate, yes, there's going to be that kind of getting to know you phase part of the conversation. But the idea is they can take what they've read and say, hey, look, I know you talked with Tyler and you told him A, B, and C, but I really want to go into more detail on C. So I have the basics, how did you do that? And then they can just have a more deeper conversation about those specific topics. And the hope is that be able to understand their level of
competency,
abilities based on those things that are really important.
Interesting. Yeah. So what advice do you give to companies? Then obviously you do that 45-minute conversation, the write-up, all the stuff, but what advice do you give to the companies looking to hire structural engineers in the market today, which is obviously like super competitive based on what you're saying?
Yeah. Yes. So I'm going to take a little bit more of kind of a frank approach here. Just because this is a problem that I've been working on every day for a year. So I think it's really important for companies to accept 2 realities about the market today, right? And one of those realities is there are not enough engineers for every company that's out there right now, which is it's a painful reality, but it's truth. Population rate decline, the recession challenges we're having, they're just not enough, right? And some companies, unfortunately, are really, really going to struggle with this problem, and they might go out of business because of it. That's obviously what every company wants to avoid, but we've seen this in other industries too. Where there's a labor shortage and some companies aren't able to weather the storm and they don't make it, and it's really tough. But that is the reality of working in a free market. Companies go out of business every day. So if you accept those 2 realities, then in my opinion, finding a solution to the problem becomes a lot more workable because you know what the risks are if you can't find a solution. So if you don't want to be one of those firms that goes out, you want to be one of those firms that thrives, then there's going to have to be some difficult steps that get taken, because this isn't one of those solutions that's just like, oh, that's going to resolve itself. Engineers are coming. Like, they're not coming. They're unfortunately just not coming. So Um, just
This is like the most pessimistic conversation I've ever had. I'm just kidding.
I'm so sorry.
But yeah, it's
I'm
true.
so
I mean,
sorry.
it's just like the numbers just aren't there. I hear you.
Yeah. Exactly. So, and again, I don't want to be pessimistic on it, but I do think it's important to at least be like, okay, like these are the knowns. Like, so now that we have the knowns, how do we solve this? Right. So we'll focus on the positive here for this one. So
yeah, bring the positive.
Yes. So, all right. So what does the solution look like? Well, the only engineers who are capable of performing the work that you need, like say you need like a 10-year experience, like PE to like handle, the work at SE, right? Handle the work that you're trying to do. Well, all of the ones that you want to talk to are currently either working for your competitor or a firm, maybe they're at an architecture firm doing in-house work, or maybe they're doing their own work and they're interested in coming back to W-2, or they're working in another state right now. Like that's where they are. They're not on LinkedIn looking for jobs, because if they were, then that solution would have worked, right? Would have found them that way. So if we accept that, then we say, okay, well, what can we do to convince them, have a conversation with them that what we have over here is a growth opportunity for them, is going to make their life better. What can we offer to do that? Because that we have to outcompete. So one thing you could do, which this is a lot. I know this is asking for a lot, right? But you could raise the pay of the entire engineering staff by like 20%, which I know is high, right? That's a lot. But when you do that, it does, in my opinion, it does two things. One, it really helps with retention, because now the engineers are like, wow, I'm getting paid really well. This work is awesome. There's nowhere to go. I'm not going to be able to earn more if I go anywhere else. This is a great company. I feel like I'm being valued. I want to stay here. And then when they have conversations with their friends, and they let them know, hey, you got to guess what? She paid 20% more. Their friends are going to be like, oh my gosh, are you hiring? Like, I'm interested, right? And then when you have those recruiting conversations, it becomes easier too, because now they're getting messages in their inbox, but now this one is all of a sudden higher. So again, I'm trying to live in reality here, where it's like, that's a lot. That's asking for a lot doing that. But if companies can find a way to do that, it can be very helpful. And there are companies that are making that decision to really pay a lot to get people, because they know how challenging it is. So the other thing they could do, if that's not an option, is that flexible work, hybrid work, really good PTO. Those are other things that engineers are reaching out to me about, where they're like, I'm feeling so overworked. I don't mind my pay, but I'm feeling so overworked. I want to find something better. I want to be at a company that's not overworking me. I think, if a firm takes a hard stance where they're like, we don't want anyone to work any more than 45 hours a week, we're going to offer a flexible schedule where they just have to work at least from 10 to 2. They make up the other hours themselves, whatever that range is. Or it's like, and we're going to offer, 2 days max in office, and it could be like ranked, right? If you're a new grad, it's 5 days in office. And after 2 years, it's 4 and 3. I don't know. You could figure something out, an incentive plan for that. That's very attractive. Even if the pay, we talked about the risk, tolerance. If you're being overworked and you're forced to work in the office 5 days a week, that's how it is, right? And you don't want that. And there's another firm who has an offer, and maybe it's only a 3% raise, but you get 2 days to work from home. That could be very attractive.
Yeah.
That could be very attractive.
I think like one of the things we're learning is that like, I feel like back in the day, again, like kind of a traditional profession, like you come in, you work your, 8 to 6, like it was very like standard. And I feel like now people are just starting, or I should say companies are starting to get more on board with the fact that it's not the job, it's like the people, right? So like and every single person is different. So like being able to just even accommodate a singular person's need, which could be totally different than somebody else,
1,000%.
And I think another thing too is I think that engineers have to be willing to ask for what they want.
Yeah.
Also, I think that's another thing that we maybe struggle with as a general type of person.
Totally.
So
it's hard to ask for something like that, especially if it goes against we'll say the status quo of what the company is, and there's a lot, especially, and I experienced this too, when I had nothing. I had a great first manager, as an engineer, but, even asking for, I remember specifically the conversation with asking for a raise or asking if I could, work from home a little more often or whatever. And my company again was fantastic, offered a lot of that, but it's still scary to have that conversation.
Totally.
It's very scary.
Yeah. But it is funny too, because when you get into a management role, you realize like you don't know that your person might want that unless they ask. So it's not even that you're like unwilling to accommodate it. You just literally have no idea. Like somebody has to speak up.
Exactly. Yeah. And those one-to-ones can help. Having more one-to-one, and I try to do those as much as I could, but I mean,
totally.
You know this too. It's hard
it's
when
totally
projects
hard.
are, when customers are calling it needs to get done.
Yeah.
It's tough.
Totally.
It's tough.
So, okay. So basically just being more flexible, accommodating people, maybe offering changes amongst the entire staff or working on like an individual basis. All of those you're saying help to improve retention and help not lose people.
Yeah, I would say that for sure. I mean, it's, I think that's fair. It's just finding what's causing the pain and removing that.
Yeah.
Having those conversations. What are you struggling with?
Totally.
What can I do to make your workday better? It's a great question to ask.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
All right. Awesome. I love all the stuff that you brought forward today, Tyler. But what about for final piece of advice? What would you tell engineers who are looking to advance their careers in the structural engineering firm? In the structural engineering field.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So I got 3 pieces of advice here. So the first one, if anyone listening hasn't read Cal Newport's amazing book, So Good They Can't Ignore You, like 1,000% recommend reading that book. Cal talks about learning rare and valuable skills in there, which is like a really great way to get what you're looking for out of work at the end of the day, which for a lot of people is they want autonomy and they want to feel valued in the work that they're doing. Getting those rare and valuable skills, chasing mastery is a great way to get that. And it's going to open up a lot of doors. So some examples of that, feel free if you have any to add, but obtaining an SC license is a great one. Learning how to lead engineers, learning how to program and automate, right? If it's like Python or Excel, something like that. Finding ways to make simple jobs faster, creating processes for repeatable work, learning how to manage projects to overcome obstacles. All of those are like, in my opinion, rare and valuable skills and would make you an amazing asset for any company, the one you're at or anyone you want to go to. So the second piece of advice I have is to be a squeaky wheel, which is exactly like we were talking about just now. Have those conversations, have those hard conversations, right? If that's something that you need help with having them, there are so many free resources on LinkedIn, which we'll talk about the third piece of advice, but there are people out there who have a lot of advice they can give you for having those hard conversations. I would say find them, listen to them, and have conversations with your manager quarterly if you can. Talk about what your ambitions are, what growth you want to get into. See if, and make sure that conversation revolves around the business needs, how your skills are going to bring more value to customers. Really like thinking about the business at the end of the day is like extremely important for this growth, right? And where you fit into that puzzle. And see if you can agree to a timeline on what that looks like. It is big. And then the third thing is network with engineers, especially engineers who are like 5 years ahead of where you want to be. Those are people that you want to buy coffee and have conversations with, be extremely grateful for those conversations and see what they did to get where they're at. And that gives you kind of a blueprint of where you want to go. And befriend recruiters, of course. I'm definitely biased with that, but the saying is cliche, I think a little bit. I'm not a huge fan of this saying. I don't know if cliche is the right word, but your network is your net worth, right? So, the average, again, this is, if you're at a company and you're making the decision to leave, right? There's a lot of factors with that, but the average raise for switching a company right now is 50% if it's into a growth role, right? If it's into a growth role. So if your goal is, I need to make more money, I have these ambitions, then networking and befriending recruiters is a great way to get there. Of course, I'd always advise speaking with your manager first, trying to get, a timeline going for promotion, but sometimes it just doesn't work and you have to do what's best for you. This is your career. right? It's your career. You have to make the decision that's best for you. So recap is learn very valuable skills, be the squeaky wheel with your manager, and then network and befriend recruiters. It's a great way to grow.
Awesome. That's great advice. Thanks so much, Tyler, for joining us on the show. And I think a lot of people are going to find this episode really, really valuable. So thanks. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Seriously, thank you so much for having me. It was a fantastic time. I really, really appreciate it. It was great meeting you, and looking forward to seeing this one when it goes live. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Okay, take care. I hope you enjoyed the episode today. We'd love to hear your feedback, comments, and/or questions. To leave them, please visit thestructuralengineeringchannel.com. There, you'll find the summary of the key points discussed in today's episode, as well as the links to any of the resources or websites Tyler mentioned during the episode. Don't forget to subscribe to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Until next time, we wish you the best in all of your structural engineering endeavors.